This is not easy to do. I mean, if you think about it, Google never expected anyone to be preserving their ephemeral content. Uh, in fact, in 2018, there was a leak of emails from Google to the Wall Street Journal. And in those emails, Google employees are talking about how can we use ephemeral experiences. Now, that's their term, ephemeral experiences. That's a term from inside the company to change people's views about Trump's travel ban.
All right, I'm honored today to be joined by Dr. Robert Epstein. And Dr. Epstein has been an incredibly influential figure in exposing especially Google chicanery along with Facebook to Congress and the world. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Epstein.
It's my pleasure. Pleasure.
Okay, I don't know if there was a slight delay. Okay, I wanted to just start off because I've watched your Joe Rogan interview, seen the creepy line, things like that. But some things have happened in the intervening years, and I don't know if they are making any difference to your discoveries or not. And specifically, I want to talk about AI. And I understand that AI is technically, according to some, really machine learning or LLMs and not technically artificial intelligence, but I'm using it as a shortcut. Do you see AI having any effect on Google and what it is doing in terms of election manipulation, et cetera?
That's probably Google interfering with our interview. They've always been using some form of AI to run their algorithms. So all that's happening now is we're seeing more use of what's called generative AI. So generative AI involves very, very complicated programs that no one really understands, that really work kind of independently of programmers, and they're smarter than previous AIs have looked. The problem is, like Google and Microsoft have been rushing to incorporate these new AIs, even into Windows operating system, into the Google search engine. Now, as a result, one of the very top people in the world in AI quit OpenAI, which is a company that created ChatGPT, which is probably the smartest AI out there right now. And one of the top people in the world quit OpenAI because he feels they're rushing things and they're not really taking precautions they should take to protect us from the things from the harm that AI do. So AI is potentially a great threat to humanity. The late physicist Stephen Hawking was very, very concerned and thought that AI could actually foretell the end of humanity, or at least the civilization. Even Elon Musk has expressed great concerns. So AI at the moment is being AI development is being rushed, unfortunately, and does present a potential threat. It is one of the kinds of things that we're monitoring. I hope we can get to talk about my monitoring system soon. But it is one of the things.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we're capable of monitoring, and that will help a little bit. But yes, AI is potentially a big problem for us. My research team has discovered more and more they're being turned over to AIs. What does that mean? That means that up until manipulation have been largely in the hands of pretty simple algorithms, or simply they've been deciding how we're going to manipulate people. More and more, though, these new methods of manipulation that it will be more and more AIs, not people, deciding how to manipulate.
And I totally agree with that. I'm hugely concerned by that, and I'm especially concerned because of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And I feel like a lot of the AIs are being trained specifically with a particular political agenda or mindset. You can call it woke, you can call it, different things. There is a definite narrative that I feel has been injected into AIs, and that's where you see some peculiar results, like hallucinations of founding fathers being African American and different things like that, and then they have to shut it down. Or I believe Microsoft released one that eventually became, we'll say, a World War II figure out of Germany in mindset. They had to shut that down. Going to what you discovered with Google and auto suggestions and all that, I feel like these subjects kind of dovetail, don't they?
Yes, they do. So yes, we all should be concerned about artificial intelligence, and we should be especially concerned that two of the top in the world, one from Google and one from OpenAI, the company that developed ChatGPT, they both quit within the past 6 months or so. They both quit, and they both quit for the same reason, because these companies are jumping the gun. They're rushing the development of Gen AI. They're rushing that development. Musk has called for a moratorium on AI development because there's no real understanding of how these new programs work, for one thing, and there's certainly no protections being built in. I can tell that you're an old Isaac Asimov fan like I am, and you probably know full well that Asimov, a science fiction writer, a long time ago envisioned the development of robots and AIs, which had built into them the laws of robotics and these laws. So the problem is that these new AIs are being built without any protections built in at all.
Yeah, it makes me think of the medical first principle of do no harm, but and that's not being built in. So I wanted to step back with your discoveries with Google and things like that, and wanted to get your opinion and parallels to Edward Bernays.
The government's leaders have always been influencing people, have always been influencing the masses. Religious leaders have always been doing that. That's been going on for probably several. Bernays said, let's make it more powerful and more effective, and actually figured out how to be more effective in millions of people. And that was just the beginning, because by the 1950s, we end up with a remarkable book, Hidden Persuaders. It was written by a journalist called Vance Packard. And it's an incredible book, which I believe is still in print. And the reason why the book was called The Hidden Persuaders is because Packard discovered the techniques of persuasion and influence and control. Those old manipulations produce the new manipulations are far more powerful, far more dangerous, and also invisible to people. So the first discovery that my group made was back in 2013. We discovered that if there's bias in search results that favors one candidate, now what does that mean? That means that if you click up high in a list of search results, it means Google's going to take you to a website that makes one candidate look a lot better than the other candidate. So that's bias, search engine bias. That if they do that, we learned they could easily shift the voting preferences of between 20 and 80% of undecided voters without anyone being aware that they're being manipulated. Now think about that. 20 and 80% of undecided voters. The first experiment we ever conducted on this topic, I thought we could produce a shift of 2 or 3%. And that first experiment we ever ran, we got a shift of 48%, which I thought was an error. I mean, good grief, 48%. We repeated the experiment and got a shift of 63%. And that was just the beginning. That's 2013. Over the years, we've discovered about a dozen techniques like this. So SEAM was just the start. That involved search results. Then we started learning about search suggestions and how they can be used to shift thinking and opinions and votes. With search suggestions, in fact, we just had an article on this published in a peer-reviewed journal. With search suggestions, we learned that Google has the power to turn a 50-50 split among undecided voters into a 90-10 split. A 90-10 split with no one having the slightest idea they're being manipulated. That's just by them manipulating those suggestions they flash at you when you're typing a search term. I mean, no one has any clue, any idea about what those search suggestions are doing and what they're for. They started out a long time ago. They started out as just being a way to make it easier for you to conduct your searches, but that's not what they are now. Now they're being used to manipulate. And by the way, just a few weeks ago, it made headlines that when you were typing a search term into Google, like Trump assassination or assassination attempt, they would take you. They weren't showing you any suggestions having to do with the assassination attempt on Trump. They were taking you to old assassination, Truman, Lincoln. They were taking you to every assassination attempt except the Trump assassination attempt. That is a perfect example of what we call SSE, or the search suggestion effect. Does it have an impact on people? Well, if you already have strong opinions about Trump, it doesn't affect you at all. It might infuriate you, but it doesn't really affect your voting. But it does affect the voting preferences of undecided voters. What they decide to suggest or not suggest, or whether they show you certain search results or other search results, what they decide to suppress, to demote, all of that has an enormous effect on undecided voters and can easily determine the outcome of an election. So 2020, for example, we calculated that Google shifted more than 6 million votes to Joe Biden. Now, Eileen left myself, and I was a Biden supporter back then. And, that's pretty outrageous. Part of me is, kind of applauds Google for shifting so many votes to Joe Biden. Part of me is horrified, because what that means is that a democracy is an illusion. It means the free and fair election does not exist. Not if a single company can shift millions of votes in elections without people's knowledge. And this was just the start. SEAM and SSE, that was just the start. We've discovered something called the targeted messaging effect. That's where Google, on its home page, puts a message and sends it to some people but not others. So what kind of message might that be? Well, right this minute, because of the monitoring we're doing, I can tell you that Google is sending register to vote reminders to Democrats on its homepage at about 2.5 times the rate it is sending those reminders to Republicans. That's a pretty bold manipulation. And by the way, that's going to turn into partisan mail in your vote reminders and then partisan go vote reminders. Those go vote reminders on election day alone, can shift more than 450,000 votes to one candidate. And those are all under Google's control. We're monitoring them, we're capturing them, which is new. But the point is, in our basic research, we've shown that these targeted messages are extremely powerful in shifting opinions and votes.
Can we talk about that a little bit, about how your monitoring system works and how people who participate, how, our computers or whatever could be involved with it?
Of course. Well, if your audience wants to know more about the monitoring that we've developed, they can go to America's, that's with an S, americasdigitalshield.com, americasdigitalshield.com. And there we have a public dashboard where you can see the data that we're collecting, and you'll see the bias in search results. You'll see the bias on YouTube recommendations. And we're collecting a lot more data than we're showing you on the dashboard. But the point is, if you go to the dashboard, again, it's Americas with an S, americasdigitalshield.com, you can see the data we are collecting. And last I checked, we had preserved more than 97 million ephemeral experiences. I'll explain what those are. And we're collecting data 24 hours a day now through the computers of, in my opinion, a lot of patriotic Americans, more than 15,000 registered voters in all 50 states. And this is a politically balanced group. These aren't just right wing or left wing. This is a politically balanced group of 4 different types of people. People who call themselves Democrats, Republicans, people who call themselves independent or moderate, and then people who say, I don't know, or I'm not sure. But we're collecting data from all 4 kinds of people, 24 hours a day. And we're collecting data which is extremely incriminating to Google and other companies, because it's showing the bias, it's showing the manipulations that we have learned about over the years. It's actually showing that they're being used. Now, let me just point out, I mentioned the term ephemeral experiences, and that's what we're preserving. And normally these are lost forever. So that the data we're collecting are extremely, extremely threatening to these companies, because by definition, ephemeral means fleeting. How does that work online? Well, when you start typing a search suggestion, a search term, they're flashing search suggestions at you, and those are there for a split second, and maybe they catch your eye and you end up clicking on one of them, but then they disappear. They're gone. They're stored nowhere. They leave no paper trail. So they're the perfect tool for manipulation. That's why recently Google was not showing you search suggestions having to do with the Trump assassination attempt. They don't want people aware of that. They don't want people talking about that, and they can suppress content. They can censor content very easily, and they do this deliberately. Search results are ephemeral. They appear, you click on one, they disappear, no paper trail. Recommendations for what videos to watch on YouTube, those are ephemeral. We're capturing all these things now. Now, think about that on YouTube. Do those recommendations actually have any effect? Well, according to Google and outside experts, but literally according to Google officials, 70% of the time that people are watching videos on YouTube worldwide, they're watching videos that have been recommended by Google's recommendation algorithm, the one that shows you all those other videos you should watch, and the one that shows you the up next video that will play automatically if you do nothing. 70% of the time people are using Google, they're watching recommended videos. Think of the power. Yeah.
They actually suppress subscriptions. There was a time where people would subscribe to their 10 channels or whatever it was. And when a creator would release a video on those channels, it would just show up in the feed. that has been completely suppressed by Google's recommendations. So even when people subscribe to channels, there are long odds whether they even see the video. The same as in Facebook, you're only going to see, I think, 15% of your actual friends' posts.
Yes, we're monitoring Facebook, TikTok, X, which used to be Twitter. We're monitoring a number of different platforms, and we keep adding more and more content. We're learning new ways practically every day of monitoring more content and preserving that content. This is not easy to do. I mean, if you think about it, Google never expected anyone to be preserving their ephemeral content. In fact, in 2018, there was a leak of emails from Google to the Wall Street Journal. And in those emails, Google employees are talking about how can we use ephemeral experiences. Now, that's their term, ephemeral experiences. That's a term from inside the company to change people's views about Trump's travel ban. So they know darn well that they can influence people's thinking, and they know that the best way to do it is with ephemeral content because no one is aware that they're being manipulated and because it leaves no paper trail. So imagine the threat that we now pose to Google and other companies because we are preserving ephemeral content by the millions. We're past 97 million preserved just in recent months. I have been invited now to go back on Joe Rogan in a couple of weeks. It's possible by the time, not only that, he contacted me directly. It was not through staff. So, but by the time I'm on Rogan again, we might be past 100 million. So, as the more data we collect, the bigger the threat that we pose to Google and other companies, because this is evidence that can be used by public officials, can be used in the courts, that shows that they really are very deliberately manipulating our children, our elections, our minds, that this is not just, my imagination. This is cold, hard data. And they're a data company. They understand the power of data. They fear data that can hurt them. And so that's what we're doing right now. This whole system wouldn't even exist, by the way, if I hadn't had a call from the Attorney General of one of our states back in 2015, because he was wondering, he was up for re-election. In his state, they elect the Attorney General. And he was wondering whether Google could interfere with his reelection. And I said, oh, yeah, this is absolutely. And I explained how. And then he asked a question which I couldn't answer. He said, but how would you know? How would you know they're interfering? And at the time, I could not answer the question. But just a few months later, in early 2016, before the presidential election, I started figuring that out. How do we know what content Google is sending to real registered voters? And I developed the first monitoring system in the world. It was pretty small. It had 95 people, we call them field agents, in 24 states. They allowed us to install special software on their computers that allowed us to track the content that Google, Bing, and Yahoo were sending to their computers. We could track it. We could compute the bias to see if there's any bias in the content. And that was back in 2016. And we preserved 13,000 politically related searches on Google, Bing, and Yahoo. We found extreme political bias favoring Hillary Clinton on Google, but not on Bing or Yahoo. So that was pretty eye-opening. So imagine that. We preserved 13,000 ephemeral experiences back in 2016. Now we're preserving that many ephemeral experiences practically every minute. So we've learned over the years how to build bigger and bigger systems that work faster and faster and that analyze the data faster. And that is how you get, that's how you make these companies accountable to the public. It's with monitoring. It's with, as Justice Brandeis, Supreme Court Justice 100 years ago said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And that's what we're doing with monitoring. We are doing to them what they do to us and our children and our grandchildren 24 hours a day. They are surveilling us, and we're now surveilling them. They get power over us through their surveillance. We're now beginning to get power over them by surveilling them, and they deserve it.
Totally agree. Question for you. I know that you're centered politically on this, but the DOJ just had a major win against Google in an antitrust case. Is some of your ephemeral research also displaying market manipulation and monopolistic behavior put forth by Google that could be used by the DOJ?
I'm going to kind of sidestep your question, though, because the fact is that although this decision, this new court decision, which is labeling Google a monopoly, as if no one doubted that before, but this court decision looks like a big deal on its surface. It's actually not a big deal. It's actually a smokescreen, both of by our government, by the Biden administration, and by Google itself. I know this because I've been working with public officials on these issues for a long time. And public officials at first were going after Google based on consumer protection law, because the big threats that these companies pose to us are all consumer protection issues. What are they? There's three of them. Surveillance. Because they're surveilling us. Google alone is surveilling us over more than 200 different platforms. They're surveilling you when you're not online. So it's the surveillance is just outrageous. Second issue is censorship, which a lot of conservatives are aware of and do complain about. And the third issue is the most important issue, and that's manipulation. Those are all consumer protection issues. And at first, our public officials were going after Google based on those issues. It was Google's lawyers working with our own public officials, our own members of government. It was Google's lawyers who gradually convinced government authorities to move away from the consumer protection issues and move toward antitrust issues. In other words, if you want to come after us as a monopoly, please. And that is what's happened. And Congress, that's what Congress has done. That's what the AGs have done. That's what the Department of Justice did. And all of that was crafted, was engineered by government officials working together with Google. Now, why would Google want us going after them for monopoly issues, but not consumer protection issues? Because the consumer protection stuff, the big stuff, that's a real threat to them. If they were not allowed to engage in surveillance, for example, or censorship or manipulation, that's where their real power comes from. So monopoly, on the other hand, it doesn't matter how many times you label them a monopoly, you can't hurt them. You can't hurt them because you can't really break them up in any meaningful sense. Everyone keeps saying, oh, we're going to break up Google and Facebook. You can't break them up. You can't break up the Google search engine, which is at the heart of all of their operations, because it won't work. You can't break up a search engine. And on Facebook, you can't break up the social media platform. That would be like putting a Berlin Wall, through the middle of every household. You can't break up the social media platforms, and you can't break up Google search engine. And these companies know that. So they said, come after us as a monopoly. And that our government was happy to do it. and it makes it look like that they're being effective. It makes them look like they're doing something, and they're doing nothing, because the three big threats are still there: the surveillance, nonstop, round the clock, whether you're online or offline, the censorship, and the manipulation, which of course is what my group studies. So that court case, in my opinion, is just one big smokescreen, which allows our officials to say, look, we're doing something. We're doing something about big tech. They're doing nothing. They're scared to death of big tech, and they work closely hand in hand with big tech.
Wow. Well, you're giving me a black pill on that, but I used to complain all the time that there was a bit of a performative piece going on, in my opinion, that you would have Jack Dorsey appear before Congress, and then they would yell at him. He would be like, okay. And then he would go leave. And then 6 months later, they come back and they yell at all of them, or Mark Zuckerberg, and say, are you going to apologize to everybody? Oh, I apologize. But nothing really seems to actually change. That brings me to the Twitter files. Have you looked into any of that, and has it had any effect with your
Well, yes, of course.
studies?
Now, the Twitter files, for people who don't know, the Twitter files refer to internal communications at Twitter that were eventually made public. Now, when Elon Musk bought the company, he really just dug deep and just to see what was going on behind the scenes at Twitter. And sure enough, what was going on behind the scenes is what everyone thought, which is that that Twitter's staff leaned left very strongly, progressive left, and that they were suppressing conservative content, and they were boosting content that was liberal, and they were doing this in pretty blatant ways. So they really did, for example, suppress stories about Hunter Biden's laptop. So did Facebook. There was government pressure in both cases on these companies to do that. So, yeah, the Twitter files confirmed what everyone kind of knew anyway, but they just confirmed that. There have been some big leaks now from Google, which also confirm the same thing. For example, when I testified before Congress the first time, which was 2019, just before I testified, a high official at Google testified, and he was asked under oath, does Google have any blacklists? And he said, no, Senator, we do not. This was under oath. Now, 3 weeks later, Zach Voorhees, who had been a senior software engineer at Google for more than 8 years, walks out of Google with 950 documents and a video. And among those documents, there were 3 documents labeled blacklist. Now, just think of the arrogance here. They're labeled blacklist, and who was on those blacklists? Well, mainly conservative organizations were being blacklisted. But, I mean, think of the arrogance. I mean, if I had blacklists at my company, I would not call them blacklists. I would call them, I don't know, shopping lists or something, but I would not call them blacklists. So, yes, exactly. Safety. Oh, safety is a nice word. The point is that, most of the companies in Silicon Valley have the same political leaning, which I happen to have myself. But I'm not happy about their manipulations and their shifting of votes and opinions and their suppressing of content, because that undermines our democracy. It means that our democracy is an illusion, which brings me back to Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was head of Allied forces in World War II, high-ranking general, insider all the way, an insider. And he served 2 terms as president. His last day in office, right before John F. Kennedy was inaugurated, he gave a speech, his farewell speech, which people still talk about to this day. This was 1961. And that speech people remember mainly because he warned about the rise of the military-industrial complex. He was very concerned about that. But that same speech, which I went back and read, also raises another issue. He also is warning about the rise of a technological elite that could someday control public policy without us knowing. And he warned us. He said, you have to be vigilant to make sure this doesn't happen. Well, guess what? We were not vigilant, and the technological elite are now in control of this country. That's not exactly a deep state. It's worse, in my opinion, because these companies are not they're not part of our government. They work with our government, but they're not part of it. They are not accountable to the public. That's the problem. They're not at least our government is accountable to the public in one way or another, eventually through elections. But these companies, we're talking about a handful of companies, and within those, a handful of executives, and they are now in charge. It's exactly what Eisenhower warned about back in 1961.
Yeah, on that note, I feel like Eisenhower had enough power that he could maintain control, but he saw within the ranks, underneath him, all these things going on, especially, how he came up all the way through being the Allied commander and everything else. And then the next guy wound up dying for some crazy reason. Are we tapping into fascism? And by that, what I mean is that communism is the government seizes all forms of production. Fascism is very similar. The only difference is that they let the corporate hold on to their control, and it's a partnership with the government.
The fact that a couple of companies in Silicon Valley could control the thinking and behavior of more than 5 billion people around the world? No one ever foresaw that. And by the way, by next year, they'll be past 6 billion. I don't even think that companies like Google and Facebook, I don't even think that they consider themselves to be American. I think they consider themselves to be global. They're global powers. They have more power than any government's ever had. And there are no restrictions on them at all, none. That's why we do the monitoring, because monitoring makes them accountable. And the more data we have, the more accountable they must be. So, no, I don't think anyone ever thought about this. This is maybe some science fiction writers did. I don't know, but this is different. In fact, some of the people, Roger McNamee is one. You may have heard of him. He's a tech billionaire. Jaron Lanier, another tech billionaire. These were two of the earliest investors in Google and Facebook. And both of them now have come out publicly, and they've each actually written books. Each one of them has released a book on this subject. Both of these men, the earliest investors in Google and Facebook, have said that these companies have basically taken over much of the world's operations, much of the world's governments, and that if they had known what these companies were going to turn into, they would not have invested a dime in those companies.
Wow. Well, that's a dark note. I always like to finish, though, with this question, which is essentially, what is the one question that I should have asked you, but I neglected to? Or as a variant, what is one question you've been waiting for somebody to finally get smart enough and ask you?
Well, the question would be, how do we protect ourselves, and not just our government and our society and our elections, but how do we protect ourselves? And which you did not ask me, but I think a lot of people when they watch an interview or a discussion like this, because it's an unstructured discussion, I noticed that from your materials, but a lot of people are thinking,
Yep.
especially if they're parents. They're thinking, okay, so what do I do? Is this a hopeless situation? Is there any way I can protect my kids? And so I do want to send people to two different websites. One I mentioned before, America's, with an S, digitalshield.com. So that's a dashboard for our national monitoring system. It also gives you a way to support our field agents because we pay them a token $25 a month. But if you think about it, if you have a 10,000 field agents, that's $250,000 a month. So the only way this system can actually keep going indefinitely is if we have tens of thousands of Americans step up and sponsor one of our field agents, which costs $25 a month, which is, in my opinion, much less than they deserve. So go to America's Digital Shield and help us to maintain and to grow this system. Now, second, go to myprivacytips.com, because there you will see an essay that I've written in which I update from time to time. And that essay begins with the sentence, I have not received a targeted ad on my computer or mobile phone since 2014. And that's me writing that, and that's me talking, and that is the truth. What I explain in that article, again, it's myprivacytips.com, I explain how I use the internet, how I use tech, so that I am not surveilled. And that's where you really need to start to protect yourself. You have to use the new technologies, not the way the companies want you to. You have to use them a little bit differently so that you are not surveilled and your kids are not surveilled. And again, it's myprivacytips.com. I'll explain how I do it. It's not that hard, but it does take a little bit of thinking, a little bit of learning, and it's worth it because let me tell you, when you finally have some privacy online, then you know what? You have some freedom too. So all these free things that you're using, they're not really free. You pay for them with your freedom. And when you start to use the technologies differently so that you're not surveilled, you feel it. You feel it. You feel more free because you're not free as long as these companies are surveilling you. And that information that they're collecting about you, they are also using to manipulate you. The more you know about someone, the easier it is to manipulate him or her. And that's what these companies are doing. One of our newest research projects, which in fact you can access online, it's at digitalpersonalizationeffect.com. We call it DPE, for Digital Personalization Effect. And we actually just posted some of this new research. We show in this research that because of the surveillance, these companies not only are sending you biased content, that's bad enough, they're personalizing the content. They're personalizing it based on what they know about you. And we found in this new research that when they personalize biased content, the effect can triple. They can have 3 times the effect on people just by making use of what they know about you. So please start out by protecting yourself. Go to myprivacytips.com, totally non-commercial. I don't sell anything. And start to use the internet and new technologies more wisely. Don't just do what these companies want you to do. Think for yourself.
I agree. And one thing I found is a few years ago, I think you were saying DuckDuckGo. I think DuckDuckGo has turned into another Google variant.
Well, I just got a text from Brendan Eich. Brendan Eich is the one who created Firefox, so one of the first semi-private browsers. But then Google took over there, so he founded Brave. And I just heard from him, as I say, just a little while ago. But he's the founder of Brave, and we use now the Brave a browser, which is excellent, and that preserves your privacy. And so you use that instead of Chrome. We use the Brave search engine. Use that instead of Google. The Brave search engine protects your privacy. So that's what I discuss in that article of mine at myprivacytips.com, is all these different alternatives to the mainstream applications. The mainstream applications are all surveillance tools, surveillance platforms. They're part of what's called the surveillance business model. The surveillance business model, in my opinion, should be illegal. And that's what Tim Cook, the head of Apple, has said too. He said it's a creepy model and it should be illegal, and I agree with that completely. Don't help out these surveillance companies. Okay, use your head and use the internet and technology a little differently. Protect your privacy and the privacy of your kids.
Tim Cook, I'm a touch cynical on it, even though I like Apple products. I'm on one right now. I feel like he says that especially because Apple customers, the people buying the products, are their actual customers versus Google and other companies whose advertisers are the actual customers. So it's a competitive advantage for Tim Cook to say, yeah, privacy, privacy, privacy. But on that note, do you personally trust Apple products over, say, other brands of products?
At the moment, yes, I still trust Apple, but I have to emphasize at the moment, because leadership changes at these companies, and it's and again, this is happening without any public input. All this stuff happens privately and in secret. And if the leadership at Apple changes, then they'll go full steam for their surveillance business model. They are collecting all the data. They just, at the moment, they that's not their bread and butter. They don't monetize the data, as far as we know, because of their current leadership. But that could change in a heartbeat.
Well, Dr. Epstein, thank you so much. And I'm glad that you keep updating the article so people can keep checking it from time to time and making sure that they stay vigilant. And I deeply appreciate it, sir.